December 1887. The blizzard was coming fast across the Wyoming Territory, and Ezra Callahan knew his cattle wouldn't survive another night in the open. 24 years of ranching had taught him to read the sky like scripture, and tonight the clouds promised death. He was checking his fence line when he found her. A young woman, maybe 17, collapsed beneath the old cottonwood tree that marked his property's edge. Her dress was torn, her dark hair matted with blood, and she clutched something in her frozen fist. A train ticket to Denver, dated 3 days ago. Ezra had buried his only son at Gettysburg and sworn never to let another soul depend on him. For 24 years, he'd kept that promise. The smart thing was to ride to town, fetch the sheriff, let someone else handle this mess. But the wind was picking up, and the temperature was dropping fast. In 2 hours, the storm would hit. In 4 hours, she'd be dead. Ezra Callahan dismounted his horse and knelt beside the girl, his weathered hands shaking, not from cold, but from the weight of a decision that would cost him everything. What price would he pay for doing what was right? If you've ever faced an impossible choice, hit that like button. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? Miss, can you hear me? Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused and wild with fever. When she saw his face hovering above her, she tried to scramble away, but her body wouldn't obey. Easy now, Ezra said, his voice gentler than it had been in years. You're hurt. Don't, she whispered. Please, don't take me back. Ezra lifted her carefully, feeling how light she was, how fragile. Inside his cabin, he laid her on his son's old bed, the first time anyone had used it in 24 years. As he cleaned the blood from her face, he saw the bruises. Old ones, faded yellow around the edges. New ones, purple and fresh. Someone had been hurting this girl for a long time. What's your name? Clara Morrison. The words came out like a confession. Ezra's hands stilled. Morrison. He knew that name. Henry Morrison ran the boarding house in Medicine Bow, a weak man who drank too much and talked too little. But this girl didn't look like Henry. Henry Morrison's your kin. Clara's face went blank. Not confusion, but careful emptiness. My stepfather. After Mama died, he said I was his responsibility. The way she said responsibility made Ezra's blood run cold. As Clara slept, Ezra studied the train ticket she'd been clutching. Denver. One way. But there was something else, a crumpled letter in her pocket. He shouldn't read it, but the storm was getting worse, and if this girl was running from trouble, he needed to know what kind. The letter was from Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. A contract for one Clara Morrison, Indian captive, aged 17. The terms made his stomach turn. She wasn't just running from Henry. She was running from slavery. The show had bought her from her stepfather for $50. When Clara woke near midnight, Ezra was sitting by the fire, the letter on the table between them. How long? He asked. 6 months. Her voice was barely a whisper. He told them I was captured as a baby, raised by Indians. They made me perform every night. The rescue scene. Ezra had seen Buffalo Bill's show once, years ago. He remembered the Indian Maiden Act, a young woman in buckskin, tied to a stake, rescued by cavalry. The crowd had cheered. The bruises? From the show. And from Henry, before he sold me. Clara pulled the blanket tighter. I escaped 3 days ago, stole money for the train ticket, but the train broke down 20 miles from here, and I've been walking ever since. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing. The blizzard had arrived. Henry thinks you're dead. I hope so. If he knows I'm alive. She didn't finish the sentence. Ezra stood and walked to the window. Through the swirling snow, he could see nothing but white. No one would be traveling in this weather. For now, they were safe. But storms don't last forever. The blizzard raged for 3 days. On the 4th morning, Ezra woke to silence and clear skies. He also woke to the sound of horses approaching. Henry Morrison rode up the trail with Walt Turner, his hired hand, both men bundled against the cold. Behind them came Sheriff Wade Thompson and 2 deputies, their badges catching the morning sun. Ezra met them on his porch, Winchester in hand. "Ezra," Sheriff Thompson called out, "we need to talk." "About what?" "About the girl you're harboring." Thompson's voice carried the weight of authority. "Henry here says his stepdaughter ran away. Says she might be dangerous, might be disturbed." Henry Morrison wouldn't meet Ezra's eyes. The man looked like he hadn't slept in days, his hands shaking from more than just cold. "She's not here," Ezra lied. Thompson smiled without warmth. "Mind if we look around? Just to be sure." From inside the cabin, Clara appeared at the window. She saw Henry and went white as fresh snow. The fear in her eyes told Ezra everything he needed to know about what Henry Morrison had done to her. "She's not going back," Ezra said quietly. The words hung in the cold air between them. Thompson's hand moved to rest on his gun. "Now, Ezra, let's be reasonable. The girl belongs with her family. Henry's worried sick." "Family?" Ezra's voice hardened. "Is that what you call a man who sells children to traveling shows?" Henry's face crumpled. "You don't understand. After her mama died, I had debts. The cattle barons were squeezing everyone. Clara was just, she was property?" Ezra finished. Thompson stepped forward. "That's enough. Henry Morrison is a respected businessman in Medicine Bow. Whatever stories this girl's been telling you, she's not right in the head. The show people said she was trouble from the start." "The show people you take money from?" Thompson's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Ezra. That's a serious accusation." But Ezra had seen enough corruption during the war to recognize it now. Thompson wasn't here to serve justice. He was here to clean up a mess that threatened the wrong people. "Clara stays," Ezra said, "until spring. Then she can decide for herself." "Can't allow that." Thompson's gun cleared leather smoothly. "She's coming with us now." That's when Walt Turner surprised everyone. "Put the gun down, Wade." The hired hand had drawn his own weapon, aimed not at Ezra, but at the sheriff. "I've seen what Henry does to that girl. I've heard her crying through the walls. She ain't going back to that." Thompson's face went red. "You're making a mistake, Walt. A big one." "Maybe, but I'm tired of making small ones." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. 5 armed men, all with fingers on triggers, all waiting for someone else to blink first. Then Henry Morrison broke. "Stop!" He stumbled off his horse, tears streaming down his face. "Just stop." Henry Morrison fell to his knees in the snow, 20 years of guilt finally breaking free. "I sold her," he sobbed. "God help me, I sold her like livestock." Sheriff Thompson's gun wavered. This wasn't the script he'd been given. "Henry, shut your mouth." "No." Henry looked up at Ezra, his eyes red with shame. "You want to know what kind of man I am? After my wife died, Clara was all I had left. She was 12 years old, and she looked at me like I was her whole world." The words came pouring out now, unstoppable. "But I was drowning in debt. The cattle barons owned my mortgage, and they wanted their money. Clara was growing up, becoming beautiful like her mother, and I started thinking wrong things." Ezra felt sick. "So when the show came through town, when they offered money for a girl who could play Indian, I told myself it was better than the alternative. Better than what I might do if she stayed. Walt Turner lowered his gun, disgusted. Even the deputies looked uncomfortable. That's not the worst part, Henry continued, his voice breaking. When she came back, when she escaped from them, I was glad. God forgive me, I was glad, because I'd missed her. But I was also terrified, because now everyone would know what I'd done. Sheriff Thompson holstered his weapon. The situation had spiraled beyond his control. Henry, I need to face what I am. Henry stood slowly, swaying on his feet. Clara, honey, I know you can hear me. From inside the cabin, Clara appeared at the door. Her face was pale, but resolute. I'm sorry, Henry whispered. I'm so sorry. Clara studied the man who destroyed her childhood, who'd sold her innocence for $50 and a clear conscience. When she spoke, her voice was steady. I know you are, Henry. But sorry doesn't give me back what you took. Henry Morrison nodded, understanding. From his coat, he pulled out a small leather pouch. His life savings, maybe $200. It's not enough, he said, offering it to Ezra. It'll never be enough, but it's all I have. Then he walked to Thompson's horse, took the sheriff's own handcuffs, and locked them around his wrists. I confess to selling Clara Morrison to Buffalo Bill's Wild West show in violation of federal anti-slavery laws. I confess to... His voice broke. I confess to failing as a father. In every way, a man can fail. Sheriff Thompson stared at the man in disbelief. Henry, you don't know what you're doing. The federal marshals, the investigation, will find exactly what I'm telling them. Henry looked back at Clara one last time. Maybe in prison I can figure out how to live with what I've done. But as Thompson reached for the reins to lead Henry away, the broken man clutched his chest and fell hard into the snow. The years of guilt, alcohol, and shame had finally claimed their price. Walt Turner knelt beside Henry, checked for a pulse, then shook his head. Heart attack, he said quietly. Clara stood in the doorway, watching the man who destroyed her life die in the snow. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief. Just an empty place where hatred used to live. Thompson looked around at the scene. A dead man, a runaway girl, a rancher who'd defied him, and a hired hand who'd switched sides. His corruption investigation would come later, but right now he had bigger problems. This didn't happen, he said finally. Henry Morrison died of a heart attack while looking for his lost stepdaughter. Natural causes. Everyone understand? It wasn't justice, but it was the closest thing they were going to get. As the sheriff's party rode away with Henry's body, Walt Turner approached Ezra. She can't stay here, he said quietly. People will talk. Ezra knew he was right. A 17-year-old girl living with a bachelor rancher would destroy both their reputations. But he also knew Clara had nowhere else to go. My sister runs a boarding house in Denver, Walt said, as if reading his thoughts. Respectable place. Clara could work there, earn her way. Clara stepped forward. I can pay my own passage. She held up the leather pouch Henry had given them. Blood money, but it spends the same. Ezra looked at the girl who'd reminded him what it meant to protect someone. In 3 days, she'd brought more life to his empty cabin than he'd felt in 24 years. But Walt was right. She couldn't stay. Spring came early to Wyoming that year. By March, the snow had melted enough for travel, and Clara Morrison packed her few belongings into a carpet bag that had belonged to Ezra's late wife. The train to Denver left Medicine Bow at noon. Ezra drove Clara to the station in his wagon, neither of them saying much about what the past 3 months had meant. She'd helped with the cattle during calving season. She'd cooked meals that filled his cabin with warmth he'd forgotten existed. And in the evenings, she'd sit by the fire, while he read aloud from his son's old books, both of them pretending this arrangement could last forever. But forever was a luxury neither of them could afford. At the station, Clara turned to face him. In the bright spring sunlight, she looked older than 17, not from hardship, but from wisdom earned through survival. "Will you write?" she asked. "If you want me to?" "I do." She reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in brown paper. "For you." Inside was a photograph. Clara standing beside his fence, feeding sugar to his mare. She'd had it taken at the photography studio in town, spending her own precious money on this moment. On the back, in careful script, "For Ezra Callahan, who showed me what a father should be. C.M. Spring 1888. The train whistle blew. Clara stood on her toes and kissed his weathered cheek, then climbed aboard without looking back. Ezra watched the train disappear into the vast Wyoming prairie, taking with it the only family he'd known since his son died 24 years ago. That night, he sat alone in his cabin, staring at the photograph. Outside, the wind whispered across the empty land, carrying the scent of new grass and the promise of another hard winter ahead. But for the first time in decades, Ezra Callahan wasn't afraid of being alone. He'd saved one life, and in doing so, he'd found his own reason to keep living. Some men spend their whole lives looking for redemption. Sometimes redemption comes looking for them. If this story touched something in your heart, show it some love with that like button. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? I'd love to hear your thoughts on choices, sacrifice, and second chances. Subscribe for more tales from the American frontier.